Today we're talking about 6 simple and practical steps to beat imposter syndrome. All right, so I was recently asked about this on a panel. Actually, I'm going to, right above my head here, I'm going to link that. There was a video that we posted where I spoke on a panel in downtown Austin, Texas, and it was about content creation and stuff like that. And then randomly the topic of imposter syndrome came up. So I see this a lot, particularly with knowledge workers, right? People that are selling digital products, or they're a coach, or they're an expert. But I also see this in other spaces too, and I've played in a lot of different spaces now as an entrepreneur. And specifically for startups, it's harder because you're seeing these titans of industry, and that's the bar, right? That's the measure. So when you're comparing yourself to people that have been doing what they've been doing for a long time, oftentimes what it does is it embodies and it reflects to you how small you really are, right? And so some people start thinking like, well, if they do this, how could I actually do what they do because I'm not on their level? So we're going to beat that. I'm going to show you exactly how you can do that. And how you can kind of get those nasty, toxic thoughts out of your brain, because it can really hurt you in business. It can really hurt your perception. If you're going in and you don't have full confidence in what you're doing, that can really impact the way you're bringing yourself into basically not bringing your best self to your business every single day. And that's going to really hurt you in the long run if it doesn't hurt you in the short run as well. So number 1, all right, no one expects you to know everything or be everything, right? And so I talk about this often, but I talk about how it's so important to niche down. It's so important for you to really pick how you're going to serve and not just try to serve everybody and do everything. Quit trying to be everything to everyone, right? Because oftentimes when you try to do that, that's when it feels overwhelming. That's when it feels like, I don't know all of these things, right? I don't know how to do all these things. I don't know how to teach all these things, right? Specifically for somebody that sells digital products. If you're trying to teach everything about running a successful online company, there's a lot of information to have to pack in. And most people don't expect you to do all those things. In fact, they often prefer people to have specialized things. Think about it this way. When you go to the doctor, they refer you to who? A specialist, right? You don't look at your doctor and look down on him because he's sending you to a specialist. You're not like, oh, well, he's not smart because he's sending me somewhere else, right? It's like, no, that person specializes in something. So it says nothing about you or about the value of your service if you recognize, look, this is not how we serve people, and just pass them on. So we hold ourselves to a standard that we don't even hold other people to, right? So it's really important to remember that. And it's really important to also think about that when you are probably holding yourself to an expectation that other people don't even hold you to. All right. So, and one thing, and this is kind of a tying to that point, but really think about this and analyze this, right? So think about other people in your space, or people you've done business with, or restaurants you've gone to, or whatever, right? And think about all the things that they provide, and things that if you held them to that same standard that you hold yourself to, what would that mean? As you can see, my dog, she's other arm, she came to visit today. It's bring your daughter to work day. So anyways, most often what we do is like, a good exercise to do that, right? I said we don't hold people to the same standard. Think about relative examples to you about people that you do business with or people you work with, and those ridiculous expectations that you have for yourself. See how ridiculous it feels if you held people to that same expectation. That's a really good exercise to kind of flip that paradigm on top of its head. All right, number 2, focused on specialized knowledge. So this is a perfect tie-in into number 1, but focus on specialized knowledge. So now that we understood we're not going to try to be everything to everyone, what are we going to be to people, right? And so there's a general principle that we're actually reading right now in my book club, VIP book club, which you can check out the link below if you want to join that book club. But we're reading Think and Grow Rich. It is the most popular business book in history, and it's not even close. Napoleon Hill wrote the book, and it was like Depression era times, and it's just fascinating when you take that travel back through time and realize how many of those principles are still the exact same today in 2019. Really, really fascinating. But anyways, one of the things that he talks about, among many things, is the importance of specialized versus general knowledge, right? And so when we talk about trying to be everything and do everything and all these other things, what happens is that you feel inadequate because there's not one thing that you're really confident about, or you're not at least focused on that one thing that you're really confident about, right? So if you can figure out first, I'm not going to be everything, I'm going to be this to people, then you can pack the knowledge in that you need, that specialized knowledge in that particular area, because that's only going to improve what Brennan Burchard calls your confidence competence loop, right? So he spends the majority of his time focusing on specialized knowledge for how he wants to serve people. So go find out, first of all, like I said, do the work to figure out how you want to serve, and then acquire that specialized knowledge that you're going to need to feel confident in what you're doing, because you have now developed acumen in those specific areas. So that's very, very important. So, and then apply specialized knowledge in those desired areas. So what's going to happen is as you're accumulating specialized knowledge, and you're applying that into your own business or with your clients or whatever, you're going to start seeing windfall because now you've been doing this and you're packing you're developing momentum in that one direction versus many directions that you're trying to do things, right? So you're going to see your progress, you're going to see your momentum, you're going to see the results, and that in turn with that specialized knowledge is going to make you feel like less of an imposter, but also feel like, look, this is what I specialize in. I'm a podiatrist, right? Like, metaphorically speaking, like this is what I do. I don't do other things outside of what I do as a podiatrist, right? And I'm not expected to, I'm not held to that standard, right? So remember this, as a startup founder, as a startup entrepreneur, somebody early on, niches lead to riches. Niches lead to riches. Say it like five times fast. It's really hard, right? But it's a very, very astute principle. And I'll give you a quick story and then we're going to move on here because I'm trying to keep this brief. I had Brian Chesky's mentor and right-hand man, Chip Conley. Brian Chesky is the CEO, co-founder of Airbnb, okay? And I talked to Chip, and Chip I asked him, I said, look, was there a big war like brewing behind the scenes between the massive hotel chains, the Hamptons and stuff like, the Hiltons and stuff like that, like between them and Airbnb when Airbnb started taking off, like we saw with Uber, like we saw with the taxi cab industry? And he said, no, not at all. And the reality of that situation is that the hotel chains couldn't figure out how the hell Airbnb was doing what they were doing and couldn't figure out how they had a $20 billion valuation. And the reason being was this: Airbnb niched down and focused on, it was kind of unintentional, I will say this. It was very much unintentional. I can't say they fully planned this. But they wanted to create a different experience, and they knew that hey, we're not trying to compete with hotels. We're just trying to create a new thing, a new subset of a market, right? They ended up creating an entirely new market by accident. And what they found was this: the reason the hotels weren't upset is because their numbers hadn't declined at all, the hotel numbers, right? So they're like, where are they getting these customers from? Like, we haven't seen the dip in our numbers to validate how they have risen to where they are. And what they found out is that the people that were using Airbnb were people that previously either stayed with family or friends or they didn't travel at all. So they created their own market by niching down and specializing in what it is that they wanted to deliver, which was like an at-home type experience for people that are traveling versus your traditional like commercial feel of a hotel, right? So very, very, very fascinating. If you look at that, it's a very applicable principle across the board. Probably one of the most notable examples, at least, that I'm aware of. All right, so number 3, and this is one that I want you to be careful about, because if you can get stuck in this mode for a long time, but do some pro bono work for the experience, right? So if you feel like an imposter, and let's say you are, I remember I had some consultants that I brought on, and it was a friend of mine and what have you, and I needed the help because my business was growing, and they were trying to be business consultants, but they were straight out of college, so they had no experience whatsoever, and they did it at a very low rate, right? They didn't even charge me at all for the first like 3 or 4 months just to get the experience. And then we worked out it was a compensation package that was based on performance, right? And so many people will be willing to do stuff like that for you if you're willing to kind of say, you know what, I don't have the experience, but I want the experience, and I put forth a lot of effort. Here's my background, this and that. And what ends up happening is you feel less like an imposter, because if you get some of these opportunities and you've done the work and you've seen the results that they've gotten, right? And maybe and I'm obviously talking as a potential, like you're a coach, you're an expert, you're a consultant, something like that. But this thing can apply for any business, right? Like you could have a beta group if you have an online community. If you had some kind of a service-based business, you could say, hey, you know what? We're going to do this at a severely discounted rate or even close to free, right? Just to get that experience on our belt so we can learn what we need to learn so that we can apply this across the board and really have a deep understanding of our customer base versus just going out and trying to charge what your competitors are charging. But here's why I say it's dangerous. A lot of people stay in that phase too long. So they're like, yeah, I'm not ready. I'm still getting experience in doing what I'm doing. I've heard that comment a lot, right? With my clients. So very, very important that you recognize that pro bono means like 1 or 2 times for a very short period of time. Don't build that as, some people will start to build that as the expectation is you're the cheap person in town, right? Or you're the cheap option. And that's not a game that you want to play, and it's not a game that leads to winning. Even Walmart couldn't win that game, if that tells you something. Like, even as big as they are, like, they couldn't play the price game, just undercutting everybody's prices. They had to switch their model. If you look at it, if you go to Walmart, they don't have the cheapest prices. Like, you can go to other places and find cheaper prices, right? So that's not their value proposition. Although they tried to play that game for a long time, it's not their main value proposition. So you don't want to be in that space. So it's very difficult to go from, hey, I'm pro bono, to, hey, now I'm charging a premium, right? And so you might have to get new people that you work with, because those pro bono people might kind of understand you to be the pro bono people. It doesn't mean that that's the case, right? I've seen people go pro bono, do such a wonderful job that the people recognize, the client recognizes, or the customer recognizes, this is worth way more. Like, you're actually fantastic. And they'll actually start saying, like, this is what I think you're worth. And sometimes it's actually market competitive rates. So it's not impossible, and it does give you the experience. So that kind of like puts some of that imposter thing at ease if it's not, hey, you're paying me $10,000 for this service or whatever that I'm rendering, right? So that can build up your confidence and kind of ease some of that imposter stuff until you do get that experience that you need to feel good about what you're doing. So focus on building small wins, right? So one of the biggest reasons that I see people have imposter syndrome is because look at what they're comparing themselves to, right? They're comparing themselves to the companies like we talked about before that are way up here when you're way down here, right? The titans of your industry. And so in relation to them, you're going to feel like you're never where they are, or it's going to take years for you to get there. So you always feel like an imposter because you're never closing that gap, or at least it doesn't feel like you're closing that gap, even if you are. And truth be told, you really don't know what goes on behind the scenes at that company, right? So it's impossible for you to really know if you are closing the gap. It's an impossible measure, right? So I'd stop playing that game if at all possible. But focus on internally, what are your small wins? Start shifting your mind. It needs to be a complete mindset shift on, here's what we're doing and here's what we have to celebrate, and focus on those small wins, right? Because those small wins start leading to big wins, and wins lead to you feeling this, right? Motivated, seeing the momentum, breaking through, right? I oftentimes think that it's just rolling up the sleeves and doing the work, getting some wins, and a lot of that imposter stuff will just fade away, right? We're going to get to that. I'm going to save that for you, okay? There's a very valuable point here. So, all right, number 5, who do you serve? Right? Who do you serve? So very important. We talked about before, right? You can't be everything to everyone. So who do you want to be something to, right? And this is important because it's going to tie in to what I'm going to talk about here, right? There's a next point that I want to make that's really, really important. But first of all, it's establishing, who do you want to serve? Who do you want? Like, is it a lot of times, a lot of business starts with one ideal client avatar, and that's it, right? There's one particular, and it might be somebody that's representative of you, right? You're providing a service, you're rendering a service because you're scratching your own itch. It's something that you wanted, something that you wanted to provide and you didn't have, and you saw there's an opportunity in the space that you now want to deploy. So really, really important, really a big one to understand is, if I can't be everything to everyone, I'm specializing my knowledge. Now I figure out who it is that I want to serve, and start with 1 or 2 ideal client avatars to start, and that's it, and you just focus on them. A lot of people, what they end up doing is they focus on trying to serve everybody at first, right? They don't have an ideal client avatar, and thus new things are coming in, and they don't feel like they have the acumen that they need because they're seeing all these different variances thrown at them. Whereas if you work with one type of ideal client avatar, maybe it might be somebody that's representative of what you were at or what you felt like. You have a deep innate understanding of them because that's where you were and that's how you felt about whatever solution that you're providing. So start small, start with one. My first one, his name was Kyle, right? Kyle was a reflection of me. I just gave him a name, Kyle. And I recommend naming your ideal client avatars, by the way. And it could be named after like your first customer and everybody that is representative or has unique set of circumstances and demographic characteristics of whatever that first customer was. So when calls start coming in or when you started getting inbound opportunities or whatever, however you render your services, you'll recognize like this is a Kyle, this is a Sally Sue, or this is a whomever, right? And you have an understanding of those people, and that really leads into you having internal confidence because you know their objections, you know the things that you need to do to provide services to them, you know what they're looking for, you know what they value. Just have a more understanding you have about who you serve, the more confident you feel. But that starts with one, not many, if that makes sense. So kind of that's the overarching theme here is focus on one, understand them at a deep level. Right. So even if that goes back to pro bono work, that's a great way to understand who that one is, right? And it'll make you feel extremely confident about serving, even if it's just that one type of customer, right? Finding other people like that one type of customer is going to make you feel extremely confident about what you're doing. Okay. So, and this is why this is important. It's fundamentally important. This is still part of number 5. All you have to do is be one step ahead of where they are. And this is particularly true for like people that are teaching people like myself. I'm teaching people business and entrepreneurship. That doesn't mean that I have to focus on teaching people how to build a $100 million company, right? I haven't done that. So how the hell would I teach somebody to do that? That's when people start to feel like imposters because they don't know. So it ties back in. All these kind of tie together, right? So if you can focus on your ideal client avatar, someone that's just below where you are, or right, okay, for example, let's say you provide social media services, right? You're a social media marketing manager for somebody. And they have a level of sophistication that's here. Like here's the bar of what they know, right? And yours is right here. Well, that's enough to get them up over that hurdle, right? So when you go looking for another customer, you're not going to go to find somebody who has a sophistication level here. You're going to go find somebody else that's right here, right? And you might find that this is where you stay and you serve, let's say this is intermediate level people of level sophistication of social media marketing, right? So your next clients, you're able to find the aspects that are similar to that client that you serve that was at this level. So you're looking for people in this range, knowing that you can get them over that hurdle. So you just focus on that, getting people over that hurdle, getting people over that hurdle. You're not going to go get somebody that's way up here. That's not your domain. That's not where you play ball, at least right now as a startup entrepreneur. So that really hones it in because now you have specialized knowledge. You know who you serve. You know how you serve, right? And then you know this is where I have to be. This is my domain. This is my domain expertise right here. This is where I play ball. And everybody else is right here, just a step beneath where I am, right? And I can get them up to where I'm at. If you get people too low, what ends up happening is you're frustrated because they don't know anything, right? And there's somebody else that maybe gets them over that hurdle, so then they're ready to work with you. So that's why when people, this is a very valuable point. That's when people are like, oh, there's already competition. It's like, dude, there's so much space. There's so much space for it. This is a world of abundance, right? Get that out of your head. There's so much room for there to be many players in this space. And honestly, sometimes people can collaborate with people they deem to be competition because they just serve in different areas, different subsets of their market, so on and so forth. So that's really, really an important thing to note. And then always continue learning, right? Always continue learning, always continue growing. One of the things that I do is I read. I'm a voracious reader. I read all the time. And the reason being is that I'm always packing my every time I read, I feel more confident about what I'm doing, right? It just feeds into my confidence about what I'm doing and what I know. I just feel like I have knowledge. And honestly, it validates sometimes too what I've been doing, right? So I read something that somebody recommends to do something a certain way, and that's the way I've been doing it. It's like, oh, that's amazing, right? So it's like having a manual, all right? When you're learning, when you're reading, it's like you're feeding your mind full of specialized knowledge about what you're doing, and it's like, I know how to do this. I have a manual now in my brain. Most people, when I see that they feel like they have, some kind of imposter syndrome, the reason being is because they're not learning, they're not growing, they're just freaking out, and they're just kind of stuck in the space of being scared about being an imposter. If you're out there learning and even studying stuff in your market in that specialized knowledge, right? That's really going to allow you to feel like, hey, I'm growing as a person just as much as I'm helping people get results, right? So here's the thing. This is what I want to end with because this is really, 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 really important. And I teased it a minute ago, but now I want to really talk about it before we close out here. Imposter syndrome is never going to go away. I know the name of this video is How to Beat It, right? But it's never going to go away. The more you grow, the louder the noises are going to become, right? So the best thing that you can, and I know that because I've talked to many people that come on my podcast and been like, man, as I've gotten, Dave Asprey, perfect example, founder of Bulletproof, and he's like, we have 100 million downloads of our podcast, right? And that means that the stakes are higher. That means if I teach somebody something that's wrong, that means that there's going to be millions of people that go out and try that thing, and what I just told them was wrong, right? So here's the thing. That's why it's fundamentally, if you actually give a shit about what you do, imposter syndrome is never going to go away, right? And so it's a good thing that you have it. So flip that on its head. It's not a bad thing you feel the way you feel. It means you care. Because if you didn't care, if you're just trying to make money, you wouldn't be watching this video. So I know you're here because you care. So understand this. Turn that into a positive. Understand that, allow that for you to channel yourself into a positive direction versus it being this negative that holds you back. Understand that I'm just being this way because I care so much. And that means I'm going to go invest in all these various things. So here's the thing. Having a framework in place so that you can take that, like all these things we talked about, these 6 steps, and then working through that every time. What it's going to tell you is this: when I feel like an imposter, it means I need to go double down on this framework so that I can continue to grow as an entrepreneur and as a service provider or whatever. And that's the other thing. If you're not growing, you're probably not going to feel like you're not going to have an imposter syndrome because look, hey, this is where I live and this is where I'm comfortable, right? But if you're like me, you're always going to be growing. You're always going to be pushing for more. And thus, every time you level up, you're going to be in that unknown territory where you start to feel like an imposter again. So it's important for you to have a framework. I'm a big believer in having regimens and protocols and things that you can follow, that when these things come up, you know how to combat it. You know what you need to do that works for you, that you can beat your imposter syndrome. Don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves. Don't be afraid to do the work. Don't be afraid to go out there, put yourself out there, and don't be afraid to acknowledge when you don't know something or you can't help somebody in the way that they want you to, they expect you to service them. All right, guys, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe, share it with a friend. If you want to hear more of this stuff, I actually have a podcast as well called Entrepreneur Hour Podcast. I've been doing it for 4 years. We've had some amazing guests. We've actually are downloaded in over 140 countries. We've had some incredible guests like Damon John, Barbara Corcoran, Marie Forleo, Dave Asprey, Guy Kawasaki, Dr. Josh Axe, Grant Cardone. I mean, the list goes on, and I actually feel bad naming names because there's been so many empowering people and powerful folks that have come on this show, and I hate naming names because I'm excluding a lot of those other people that have been on, but I'd love for you to browse over and subscribe to the show as well. Also, there's a program, I know I talked about the VIP book club, there's a link below that you can check out there, but I do sell a business burnout breakthrough course for just $9. It's an amazing program that you guys can take advantage of. If you've ever felt like, oh, I'm just burning out, like I don't have a system to do what I need to do, and I feel like I'm just running all over the place and doing all these things, and there's no way this is sustainable. So this is a program specifically for that. Gives you my entire process, my entire protocol for how you can run your life, keep our priorities in order, and still have some semblance of a personal life in the process. All right, guys, appreciate you checking this out, and I'll see you on the next one.